I want to go over two pretty crazy rosters that have come up in the offseason. Obviously, these two have made pretty big changes. I will be talking about Leviatan and MIBR, who as you can see have had very different results last year. Obviously, Aspas has left Leviathan. There was some drama basically saying he didn't like the way the team was being run. I think ultimately he just wanted to play with NZR, who was on Lev up until Aspas joined. So now he is joining MIBR alongside NZR, along with the rest of the roster, which we will get into later. As well as Aspas is reuniting with his coach from Loud, Fraud, which I don't really see people talking about and I think is a very good thing for this team. And I will also be going over if Aspas can even reach the same heights he reached with Lev moving forward. But first I want to talk about Leviathan, who have gotten Demon1 to replace Aspas, which I think everyone knows by now. But was this a good idea? Because we all know Demon1 is not an Aspas archetype duelist. Aspas, although maybe a bit of a baiter, a bit of a KD player, he's obviously more flexible than someone like Demon1. He can play more agents in his respective role. He's better with the op, he's more experienced. So it's interesting they got Demon1 in place of Aspas. It's like a square peg for a round hole situation here. They're just not the same type of player, and I think we saw this on NRG with Demon1. They kind of picked him up as an Aspas type duelist. He would hard entry and even play Raze over someone like Victor, who was on the team at the time. But contrary to the popular take, I actually think Demon1 could learn Raze. I don't think it's some incredible task or some David versus Goliath situation here. And last year probably wasn't a great representation of how good or bad his Raze is in a real setting due to the IGL situation on that team being very poor. But funny enough, they have another pretty good Raze player on their team at the moment in Tex, and you could also argue King, but Tex was the duelist for the guard when they ascended, but had the opportunity to play with Aspas and swap to Sentinel. So I'm unsure if he just didn't want to play duelist anymore, or if he swapped just for the opportunity to play with the GOAT. We obviously saw this with Leaf, who was an extremely good duelist, but due to his preference he would end up playing Sentinel. But there could be an interesting dynamic on this team with Tex being there as someone who could play things like Raze. Whether we would see a double dive comp with Demon1 on Jet and Tex on Raze, I feel like it's probably unlikely. Or we even see Tex or maybe King on Raze for a map while Demon1 is Brim, which I think makes more sense as they picked up another flex player, which is what I'll get into next. The entire roster would be Demon1 as primary duelist, Calm, Scan Initiator, Tex, Sentinel player, NotNK, a French player who will be coming in place of Mazinho and play flex, and King, who will be the primary smokes player. It's not announced yet, but I think it's pretty well known they've picked up NotNK. I'm probably saying that horribly wrong, but I think he's a great replacement for Mazinho. I didn't really follow NotNK closely last year because obviously Gentlemates were not a very great team, but after looking into him, he's definitely a good player who just didn't have success on his last team, which you see with a lot of really good players. If you remember Mazinho at the start of the year, he wasn't really playing too great, but he would end up coming to his own towards the end, and I think with NotNK, you will definitely be getting a stronger start. I think NotNK has a ceiling to be better or as good as Mazinho was by the end of the year, obviously without the allegations. They have Demon1, a French guy, and a guy from Argentina. I'm super curious to see what the comms sound like on this team. So to answer my own question, is Demon1 a good replacement for Aspas? Probably not. My prediction, if Demon1 is truly a horrible Raze, I think after a couple matches, maybe after kickoff, they will try Tex or King on Raze. Obviously depends on the map and the comp they're running. I think one thing people are overlooking is the chemistry between Demon1 and Calm. The primary duelist and the guy who will be throwing support utility for him, I think this is ultimately a positive thing for this team. But yeah, I think this roster has a ceiling to be top 3 in Americas. I mean, they could be top 1, but realistically, I think top 3 to 4 is their ceiling. Now I want to talk about MIBR. Obviously, the big pickup being Aspas. It's important to note that Aspas has played a really big part in scouting or picking players for this roster. I'm sure NZR and the coach Fraud had some input as well. So the entire roster would be Aspas, the primary duelist. NZR would play Scan Initiator / IGL, Cortesia as Smokes, Artisan, I'd imagine he's going to Sentinel role. I could be wrong here. And Zenom is Flex. Please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong about any of their roles or have butchered any of their names. I think that dynamic between Fraud, NZR, and Aspas is going to be what takes this team far. Then you have the 4 minions who are capable of shooting pretty well and are basically just going to let Aspas bait them. Partially joking, but I could see this roster having some success. I think their ceiling is to be a top 5, top 6 team. Americas is very strong this year, but keep in mind an underrated team has won champions the last 2 years. But I don't think this team is winning anything or reaching the same heights Love did, or will this year. Obviously Aspas had a large say in who's going to be on this roster, but there are really not that many players to pick from, to be fair, as it was towards the end of the offseason. So I'm super curious to see how they perform. Obviously I don't think the only good players are the current players in franchising. There are tons of good players in tier 2. So ultimately I think top 5 is their peak. If they were to make an international event, I think that's a win in itself, just based on how insanely stacked Americas is this year. Please let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I said. And yeah,